The unseen battle begins. The summer heat hung over the city like an unrelenting force, turning the pavement into a griddle that seemed to sizzle with every step. The air was thick with the smell of asphalt, sweat, and exhaust fumes, making every movement feel like a burden. Pedestrians shuffled between storefronts, their faces glistening under the oppressive sun, desperate for a reprieve in air-conditioned buildings. John Cena adjusted the brim of his baseball cap, keeping his head low as he stepped into a local supermarket. He wasn't looking for attention, just a bottle of cold water before heading back to his hotel. The automatic doors whooshed open, and the blast of cool air hit him like a wave of relief. The supermarket was packed, cashiers calling out prices, carts squeaking along the aisles, and customers making their way through the crowd. Cena moved toward the back, weaving past the bustling shoppers, eyes locked on the refrigerated section. He reached for a bottle of water when a sharp voice cut through the general hum of the store. "Put that back." The air in the store seemed to shift, tension crackling like an electric current. Cena turned his head toward the checkout area, his instincts already on high alert. A confrontation was unfolding near the self-checkout machines. A woman in an electric wheelchair, her dark, curly hair pulled back into a ponytail, was staring down a large, intimidating man wearing a leather jacket littered with patches. A biker. His stance was hostile, his posture stiff with aggression. "I saw you," the woman said, her voice firm, unwavering. "You stuffed that bottle under your jacket." A murmur rippled through the surrounding shoppers. Some whispered to each other, while others merely watched in stunned silence. The biker turned his head slowly, his lips curling into a mocking sneer. He scanned the store, gauging the attention before locking eyes back onto the woman. His voice, when he finally spoke, was drenched in venom. "You calling me a thief, you crippled little." His words were cut off by a few gasps in the crowd. Cena felt his jaw tighten. The woman, however, did not flinch. "I'm calling it like I saw it," she replied evenly. "You didn't pick that bottle up from the shelf like everyone else. You stuffed it under your jacket and headed straight for the exit." The biker let out a slow, cruel chuckle. "Oh, we got a detective in a wheelchair now, huh? Rolling around solving crimes." A few people chuckled nervously, but the woman didn't waver. Cena admired that. Courage wasn't about muscle. It was about standing tall even when you couldn't stand at all. The biker took a step forward, towering over her. The fluorescent lights above cast sharp shadows on his scared face, his eyes burning with hostility. "You really think you can talk to me like that?" His voice had dropped an octave, quieter but somehow more dangerous. A few feet away, a security guard finally decided to step in. A tall, broad man with a badge clipped onto his shirt. He eyed the biker warily, then turned to the woman. "What's going on here?" the guard asked. The woman nodded toward the biker. "This guy tried to steal a bottle of wine." The biker scoffed, shaking his head dramatically. "You gonna believe her over me?" His voice took on a mocking tone. "Simon, man, look at her. She's just mad at the world, 'cause she's stuck in that chair." The crowd murmured again, some in discomfort, others in silent disapproval. Cena had heard enough. He took a step forward, his presence cutting through the tension like a knife. The biker barely had time to react before Cena's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist just as he moved to shove the woman's chair. Grip. Solid. Unbreakable. The biker's eyes flicked up, recognition dawning too late. "That's enough," Cena said, his voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable warning. The biker struggled against Cena's grip, his muscles flexing, but it was like trying to move a steel beam. The veins in his forehead pulsed with fury. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he spat. Cena didn't flinch. "The guy telling you to walk away before you make a bigger mistake." A long, tense silence. Then, the biker yanked his arm back, stumbling slightly. His eyes darted to the woman in the wheelchair, and a slow, malicious grin stretched across his face. "We ain't done, sweetheart." With that, he stormed toward the exit, shoving past customers as he went. The tension in the store slowly began to dissolve, and the crowd exhaled as if they had all been holding their breath at once. The woman looked up at Cena, her breath still shaky from the confrontation. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying the weight of relief. Cena finally released his grip, stepping back slightly. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just pissed." Cena let out a short chuckle. "Fair enough." She hesitated, then squinted slightly at him. "Wait, you're John Cena, aren't you?" Cena smirked, taking a sip of his water. "Depends. You gonna post this online if I say yes?" She laughed, shaking her head. "I might." Cena chuckled again, then glanced at her stomach, only just now noticing. "How far along?" 8 months, she replied, resting a hand over her belly. "Twins." "Damn," Cena said, nodding. "You should be taking it easy." "Tell that to this heat," she muttered with a grin. "I just wanted a damn soda." Cena's expression darkened slightly as he glanced toward the exit. His instincts were sharp. He knew guys like that didn't take embarrassment well. Some people didn't know how to lose. "Be careful," he warned. "People like that hold grudges." The woman sighed but nodded. "I'll be fine. Thanks again." They exchanged a final nod before she turned back to finish her purchase. Cena exhaled, shaking his head as he walked out of the store. The heat hit him immediately, but he barely noticed it. He twisted off the cap of his water bottle, taking a long drink. Then he heard it. A shout. A voice he recognized. Cena's gaze snapped toward the parking lot, his jaw tightening. There, surrounded by 3 bikers, was the same woman from the store. And the man from earlier. He was standing right in front of her, towering over her wheelchair, his boot raised. Cena's grip on his water bottle tightened until the plastic crumpled in his fist. His voice came out low, sharp, unshakable. "Hey." 3 heads snapped toward him. The biker grinned. "Oh, look who showed up." Cena took a step forward. "Yeah," he said, "and now you've got a problem." The breaking point. The sun had sunk lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt parking lot. The air still burned with the heavy heat of the day, and the faint smell of gasoline and melting rubber lingered like a warning. John Cena didn't blink as he took another step forward. His figure was a solid wall of resolve, cutting through the tension that weighed heavily on everyone present. His body radiated an undeniable authority that couldn't be ignored, and every fiber of his being was ready for what was about to come. The biker, the same man who had tried to humiliate a defenseless woman, stood with his arms crossed, the malicious grin never leaving his face. Around him were 2 more, both rough, unshaven, and itching for trouble. Their leather jackets bore patches of loyalty to some small, unnamed gang, their boots scuffing the ground with every threatening shuffle. But what made Cena's blood boil wasn't the arrogance dripping from the biker's smirk. It wasn't even the sneer from the others that tried to rattle them. It was the fact that they had surrounded the woman again. Alicia, he realized now that was her name, was trapped in her wheelchair, her face tight with defiance and fear. She was clearly trying to stay strong, but Cena knew that strength wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about standing tall despite it. And these men were preying on someone who couldn't physically stand. That was unforgivable. The leader took a step toward Cena, hands flexing into fists like a man who thought size and muscle would win him the fight. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, huh?" His voice was slick with venom, tainted by bruised ego and simmering rage. Cena's eyes narrowed. He was ready for this. "You don't get to intimidate people just because you feel small inside." The biker's sneer twisted into something darker. "You think you're some kind of hero. We're not done here." His boot raised again, this time aimed straight at Alicia's stomach. But he never got the chance to land the blow. In less than a second, Cena closed the distance. His hand shot forward, grabbing the biker's wrist mid-swing. The force of the grip stopped the man cold, the strength behind it immovable. The biker tried to yank away, But Cena didn't let go. His expression remained cold, dangerous, and unwavering. "You don't touch her." For a moment, there was only silence. A suffocating, heavy pause where even the heat seemed to freeze. Then chaos erupted. One of the biker's friends lunged forward, swinging a heavy fist toward Cena's head. Cena ducked instinctively, the fist slicing through the air. Before the attacker could recover, Cena drove his shoulder into the man's gut, lifting him off the ground and slamming him against the side of a parked car with a metallic crash. The second biker, quicker than the first, swung a rusted chain, the metal links cutting through the air with a menacing hiss. Cena twisted just in time, dodging the blow by inches. He grabbed the biker's wrist, twisting it until the chain clattered to the ground. A quick knee to the stomach followed by an elbow to the back sent him sprawling onto the pavement. The leader, now free from Cena's earlier grip, took his chance. He rushed forward, landing a hard punch to Cena's side. The blow connected, but Cena barely flinched. Years of training had taught him how to absorb pain like it was just another part of the job. He turned to face the biker fully, and for the first time, the arrogance in the man's eyes began to crack. "You made a mistake coming back," Cena said, his voice low and controlled, like thunder rumbling before a storm. With one swift movement, Cena grabbed the biker by his leather jacket, dragging him close until their faces were inches apart. "You don't get to hurt people who can't fight back. You're done." The biker spat in defiance. "You can't stop us forever." Cena didn't reply. He didn't need to. Instead, he drove the man backward and slammed him into the hood of a car, the force of the impact reverberating through the metal like a drumbeat of justice. The sound of approaching sirens finally cut through the chaos. Blue and red lights reflected off the windshields, bathing the parking lot in flashes of authority and justice. Two squad cars pulled in fast, tires screeching as uniformed officers spilled out, guns drawn and voices sharp. Hands where we can see them. The bikers were too beaten and disoriented to argue. The officers quickly moved in, restraining them with cuffs that clicked tightly against their wrists. Alicia let out a shaky breath. Her knuckles were white from gripping the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly. Cena turned to her, softening his expression. "You okay?" She blinked at him, her breath ragged. "I think so. You didn't have to do that." Cena gave a small, reassuring smile. "Yeah, I did." One of the officers approached him, recognition dawning immediately. John Cena. His voice carried a note of disbelief mixed with gratitude. Cena simply nodded. "They won't be bothering her anymore." "Right." The officer glanced at the restrained bikers and nodded. "We've been after this crew for a while. Assault, theft, harassment. You helped us wrap this up nicely." The leader of the bikers, now bloodied and cuffed, sneered at Alicia as the officers dragged him toward the squad car. "This isn't over," he hissed. Alicia didn't flinch. "Yeah, it is." Cena couldn't help the small smirk that tugged at the corner of his mouth. She wasn't just strong, she was brave. The officers finished loading the bikers into the back of the squad cars, and the tension in the parking lot slowly began to fade. But Cena knew better. This wasn't over. Later that night, the city had finally quieted, the oppressive heat of the day giving way to the cooler breath of evening. But Cena's mind was far from at ease. The hotel room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner, but his thoughts were racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. His phone buzzed against the nightstand. Unknown number. His gut clenched. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice, shaky, scared, and familiar. "Cena, it's Alicia. I think someone's outside my building." Cena's pulse quickened. "Are you inside?" "Doors locked." "Yeah, but my neighbor just called. She said there are two guys standing by the parking lot. They're just waiting." Cena didn't hesitate. He was already throwing on his shoes, grabbing his keys. "I'm on my way. Don't open the door for anyone." Stay inside. You hear me? Yeah, I hear you. The line disconnected, and Cena was already moving. This wasn't over. Not yet. On the streets again. The drive to Alicia's apartment was a blur. Red lights passed through without a second thought, the engine growling beneath his steady hand. The familiar fire of adrenaline surged through him, sharp and focused. This wasn't just about stepping in anymore. This was about finishing it. When he pulled into the parking lot, the headlights cut through the shadows. There, near the edge of the lot, were two figures, half hidden, waiting in the dark. Cena didn't even bother turning off the engine. He stepped out, every muscle in his body one tight like a coiled spring. His footsteps echoed across the asphalt, loud and deliberate. The two men turned, recognition dawning far too late. You boys lost. Cena's voice was low, dangerous. One of the men took a nervous step back. We're just here, hanging out. Man. Cena's gaze didn't waver. Funny place to hang out, considering you're lurking around her apartment again. The taller of the two tried to posture, puffing his chest out like a dog about to bark. You think just 'cause you're some big-shot wrestler, you can scare us off forever? Cena took another step forward. The tension in the air turned razor sharp. No. His voice was flat, like steel on stone. But I'll make sure you regret every second you spent thinking about hurting her. The first man shifted nervously. The second's confidence crumbled like sand beneath the weight of Cena's glare. Get out of here. Now. They didn't need a second warning. They turned and ran, disappearing into the night like shadows being burned away by the sun. But Cena knew better. They'd be back. And when they did, John Cena would be waiting. Shadows close in. The night had settled into an eerie stillness, the oppressive heat of the day finally giving way to a heavy, humid silence. The streets were deserted, save for the occasional passing car or the distant sound of sirens wailing into the city's underbelly. But for John Cena, there was no calm. The two bikers had run off into the shadows like cowards, but he knew better than to believe they were done. Men like that didn't let humiliation go easily. They came back. They always did, angrier, more reckless, more dangerous. This wasn't over. And it wouldn't be until they were stopped for good. Inside Alicia's apartment. Alicia sat near the window, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair tightly enough to turn her knuckles white. She stared out into the night, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the dim glow of the parking lot streetlights. Every small sound, a creak from the building settling, the distant rumble of a car engine, made her shoulders tense. She was tired. Not just from the events of the day, but from the weight of fear pressing down on her chest, like an immovable stone. The knock on the door made her jump. Her heart skipped a beat until she heard the familiar, steady voice on the other side. It's me. With a shaky breath, Alicia unlocked the door and rolled back, allowing Cena to step inside. He closed the door firmly behind him, double-checking the lock. They're gone, Cena said, voice low and calm. His eyes were sharp, scanning the apartment as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the shadows. But they'll be back, Alicia muttered. Her voice wasn't afraid. It was angry, frustrated, exhausted. They're not going to stop, are they? Cena shook his head, his jaw tight. No, not until they think they've won. And how do we make them think they've lost? That question lingered in the air, thick and heavy. Cena knew the answer wasn't simple. Men like those bikers didn't just back down. They didn't walk away until someone made it impossible for them to come back. We fight back, Cena said finally. But smart, not just with fists. Though if it comes to that, I'll handle it. We hit them where it hurts most. Alicia stared at him. And where's that? Their pride, Cena replied. Their reputation. Men like that thrive on fear. If we take that from them, they've got nothing left. A new strategy. The next morning came with a heavy, suffocating heat that wrapped the city in its relentless grip. But for Cena and Alicia, there was no time to think about the weather. They were focused on something far more dangerous: ending this. "You're sure about this?" Alicia asked, adjusting her chair as Cena placed a small camera on the windowsill. "They've been following you for days. If they show up again, we'll have proof, real evidence, something the police can use to put them away for good." Alicia frowned. "You think that's going to be enough? They don't seem like the kind of guys who care about jail time." Cena tightened the screws on the camera. "They'll care when they realize they can't intimidate you anymore. That's what this is really about, making you scared, making you feel small." Alicia exhaled, staring at the floor for a long moment. "I don't feel small. Not anymore. Not with you here." That hit Cena deeper than he expected. "You shouldn't need someone like me to feel safe," Cena said quietly. "But until this ends, I'll be here." The trap is set. That night came faster than expected, bringing with it a tension that gripped Alicia's apartment like an iron vise. The trap was simple: wait for the bikers to return, catch them on camera, and call the police with undeniable proof. But waiting wasn't easy. Alicia sat by the window again, her eyes locked on the parking lot below. Cena sat nearby, his arms folded, posture relaxed, but his eyes, sharp as a blade, every muscle coiled like a loaded spring. "You think they'll come back tonight?" Alicia asked. Cena nodded slowly. "They're cowards, but they're cowards with pride. And that's dangerous." For hours they waited. The city outside slowly quieted, the sounds of traffic dying down as the night deepened. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, 2, and then movement. 3 shadows emerged from the darkness, creeping toward the building with slow, deliberate steps. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods, but Cena didn't need to see their faces to know who they were. "They're back," Alicia whispered, her voice tight with fear and defiance. Cena stood up slowly, every muscle in his body ready for the fight he knew was coming. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "What are you going to do?" Cena glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "End this." Showdown in the shadows. Cena slipped out of the apartment quietly, moving like a ghost through the stairwell. His footfalls were silent, calculated. Years of training had taught him how to move unnoticed when it mattered most. When he stepped into the parking lot, the night air hit him like a wall. The heat still lingered, thick and heavy, wrapping the city in its suffocating grip. The 3 bikers didn't see him at first. They were too busy creeping toward Alicia's building, their posture low and threatening. One of them carried a crowbar, the other a small canister, gasoline. They weren't here to intimidate. They were here to destroy. "Not tonight. Not ever. Looking for me." The voice sliced through the night like a blade. The 3 bikers froze. The leader turned first, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Cena. The arrogance was gone now, replaced by something darker. "You should have stayed out of this, and let you hurt someone who can't fight back. Not a chance." The leader took a slow step forward, his fists tightening at his sides. "You think you were some kind of hero. You're just a man. You bleed like the rest of us." "Maybe," Cena said, taking a step forward of his own. "But I don't break like you." The fight happened fast. The first biker lunged with the crowbar, swinging wide. Cena ducked easily, stepping inside the man's reach and landing a brutal punch to his ribs. The crack of bone echoed in the silence, and the man crumpled to the ground with a groan. The second biker rushed forward, swinging wildly, but Cena sidestepped, grabbing the man by the jacket and throwing him into the side of a car. The metal clanged loudly, and the man slid to the ground, motionless. The leader was all that remained. His eyes were wild now, desperate. "You're dead. You hear me? You're dead." Cena didn't reply. The leader swung with everything he had, a wild punch meant to end it. But Cena blocked it easily, stepping inside the man's guard and grabbing him by the collar. He didn't punch him. Instead, he leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous. You don't get to hurt people anymore. You don't get to be the monster hiding in the shadows. The leader's bravado shattered. Cena let go, shoving him backward onto the ground just as the flashing red and blue lights of police cars painted the night sky. The aftermath. The police arrived quickly, restraining the bikers and reading them their rights. The officers didn't need to ask what had happened. The evidence was all around them, caught on camera, recorded, undeniable. Alicia watched from her window, her heart pounding as she saw the men who had haunted her nights finally taken away. It was over. At least, for now. In the quiet hours, back in the apartment, Alicia turned to Cena. They're gone. For good this time. Cena nodded slowly. Yeah, you're safe now. Alicia exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. She looked up at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. You didn't have to do this, but thank you. Cena offered a small, tired smile. You didn't back down when you saw something wrong. That's bravery. You deserved someone standing up for you. Alicia was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Cena looked out the window, watching as the city began to breathe again. Now, you live your life, without fear. The weight of scars. The sun had barely begun to rise, spilling faint orange hues over the city skyline, like a slow, cautious breath after days of suffocating tension. The first light of dawn painted everything in gentle golds and soft pinks, but the weight of the night before still clung heavily to the air, like smoke that refused to fade. For John Cena, sleep hadn't come. He sat on Alicia's couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring out the small window overlooking the street below. His muscles ached from the fight, sharp reminders of every blow landed, every punch thrown. His body was built for this kind of punishment, trained to absorb pain like armor. But it wasn't the bruises that weighed on him. It was the memory of the fear in Alicia's eyes. Not fear of pain. She was stronger than that. It was the fear of being powerless, trapped, alone in a world where bad men didn't care about her voice or her courage. And the worst part, he knew that fear. Not in the same way. Not from a wheelchair, not from vulnerability, but from standing in front of people who wanted to tear him down and realizing that sometimes, no matter how strong you were, you couldn't stop all the monsters. Some scars weren't physical. Alicia's strength. The soft sound of movement from the hallway broke Cena's thoughts. He turned to see Alicia rolling into the living room, her hair messy from sleep, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. You didn't sleep, she said quietly. Didn't need to, Cena replied, voice low but calm. Alicia crossed her arms, studying him. You keep doing that. Acting like you're made of stone. Like this didn't shake you too. Cena looked away, jaw tightening. It's not about me. Maybe it should be for once, Alicia muttered. Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken truths. Alicia adjusted her chair, moving closer until she was directly in front of him. You saved my life, John, she said, voice firm. Twice. You didn't have to. And you're still here. Acting like this isn't eating you up inside. Cena exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. I've seen people hurt before, Alicia. I've seen how the world chews up the ones who can't fight back. You didn't deserve to go through that. And you think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every morning knowing there are people who'll look at me and see someone weak? Her voice didn't waver. It was steady, sharp like a blade forged from pain and resilience. But you know what? I'm still here. I didn't back down in that store. I didn't let them break me in that parking lot. And yeah, I was scared, terrified. Actually. But I didn't give up. And neither did you. Cena stared at her, silent. You can't carry my fear too, John. You've got your own demons to deal with. But right now, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. Right now, you need to let yourself be human. The shadows of the past. It had been years since Cena allowed himself to revisit the memories that haunted him. Years spent burying those moments beneath layers of routine, work, and the carefully curated image of unbreakable strength. But Alicia's words hit something inside him that had remained untouched for too long. You ever lose someone because you weren't strong enough? Cena's voice was raw, barely above a whisper. Alicia blinked, surprised by the sudden vulnerability. What happened? Cena leaned back, eyes distant. When I was a kid, my best friend lived down the block. We did everything together. Baseball, wrestling in the backyard, getting into trouble like dumb kids do. He was small, skinny, always picked on by the older kids. He swallowed hard. One day, I wasn't there. I had some wrestling practice across town, and those same guys who always picked on him. They didn't just tease him that day. They jumped him, beat him so badly he ended up in the hospital. Alicia was silent, letting him speak. He recovered, physically, but something inside him changed after that. He never smiled the same, never trusted anyone the same. And I kept thinking, if I had been there, if I had just been there, maybe they wouldn't have touched him. The room felt heavy with the weight of old regrets. That's why I don't walk away when I see someone in trouble, Cena continued, because I know what it feels like to wonder if you could have stopped something terrible from happening. Alicia reached out and squeezed his arm gently. You're not that kid anymore, John. You were there for me. And that means something. A new threat. The calm didn't last long. Later that afternoon, as Alicia was getting ready for her physical therapy session, Cena's phone buzzed on the table. The number was unknown. Again. A sharp, sinking feeling hit his gut. He answered. Yeah. The voice on the other end was rough, raspy, and full of venom. You think this is over? You embarrassed us. You think you're some hero. You're dead, Cena. Both of you. You'll never see it coming. Click. Cena's jaw tightened like a vice. Who was that? Alicia asked, rolling into the room. Cena didn't answer right away. His mind was already racing, calculating the possibilities, the risks, the next move. They're not done, he said finally. So what do we do? Cena stood up, resolve hardening inside him like steel. We end this. For real. Drawing the line. The police had done what they could, restrained the bikers, processed them, and let the law run its course. But Cena knew better. The men behind this weren't just street thugs. They were part of something bigger, a gang that didn't just back down when someone fought back. They came harder. They hit where it hurt most. They're not going to stop until we make them stop, Cena said. And we're going to need help. Alicia raised an eyebrow. Help from who? From people who don't scare easily. Cena pulled out his phone again, scrolling through his contacts before finding the number he needed. Hey, he said after the line picked up. I need a favor, and I need it fast. An unlikely ally. That night, help arrived. An old friend of Cena's, Marcus Ramirez, a retired Marine turned private security expert, pulled up in a black SUV. He was tall, broad, with a scar running down the side of his cheek, like a reminder of battles long fought and survived. John freakin' Cena, Marcus said with a grin, stepping out of the car. When you said you needed help, I didn't expect it to be this bad. It's worse than I thought, Cena replied. These guys aren't just petty criminals, they're connected. And they're coming back. Marcus's face darkened. Then let's make sure they regret that decision. Preparing for the final fight. The next few days were spent turning Alicia's apartment into a fortress. Cameras, reinforced locks, motion sensors. Every corner of the building was secured. But it wasn't just about defense. They were preparing for the inevitable, the final confrontation. Because Cena knew that no matter how many precautions they took, these men would come back. And when they did, they wouldn't be leaving in one piece. You ready for this? Cena asked Alicia one night, as they went over the security plans. Alicia nodded, her eyes sharp with determination. I'm done being afraid. Cena offered a rare, genuine smile. Good. Because when they come, we're going to finish this. Together. The last stand. The air was thick with anticipation. The city was alive, but not with its usual rhythm. It was quiet, too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Inside Alicia's apartment, every inch of the space was fortified. Cameras blinked silently in the corners, and the reinforced locks gleamed like guardians against the darkness that lurked outside. Every detail had been planned down to the second. But John Cena knew that all the preparation in the world couldn't erase what was coming. This wasn't just another fight. This was war. The days since the threat had been a blur of tension, strategy, and training. Alicia had refused to sit on the sidelines, and Cena respected that. She wasn't a victim. She was a fighter, and tonight, she was ready to prove it. Final preparations. "You sure you're up for this?" Cena asked, tightening the last screw on one of the door reinforcements. Alicia adjusted herself in her chair, her expression steel-sharp. "I didn't come this far just to sit here and watch." "You've got guts. I'll give you that." "Not guts," Alicia corrected. "Just tired of feeling powerless. I'm done being afraid." Marcus Ramirez stood by the window, scanning the parking lot below. His military training was apparent in every movement, a man used to being prepared for the worst. He hadn't said much since arriving, but his presence alone made the apartment feel like a fortress. "They'll come at night," Marcus said without turning from the window. "It's when cowards strike, when they think the world won't see them." Cena nodded, flexing his hands to shake off the tension gathering in his muscles. "That's what I'm counting on." The plan was simple, but dangerous. They knew the bikers wouldn't back down. Not after being humiliated. Not after being arrested and let out on bail by people who didn't understand how dangerous they really were. "We let them think they've got the upper hand," Cena said, voice low and steady. "They'll try to break in, same pattern as before. We draw them in, and then we finish it." Alicia's jaw tightened, "And if they come armed, then we make sure they don't get a chance to use it." Marcus's voice was like steel wrapped in quiet fury, the calm before the storm. Hours passed. The city outside continued its endless hum, but inside the apartment, time stretched thin, every second dragging out like an eternity. The tension was suffocating, a thick weight pressing against every breath. Cena sat in silence by the door, eyes locked on the feed from the cameras displayed on Marcus's laptop. The footage showed every angle of the outside, an unforgiving eye in the dark. Alicia sat near the window, her hands resting on the armrests of her wheelchair. Despite the fear that crawled under her skin, she refused to show it. "Why are you still here?" she asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. Cena didn't look away from the screen. "Because I've seen what happens when no one steps in. I won't let that happen again." "You keep saying that, but you never talk about why." There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. "Because I lost someone once," Cena finally said, his voice raw and distant. "Someone who needed help, and I wasn't there. I was too late. I promised myself that wouldn't happen again." Alicia didn't press further. She didn't need to. Some stories didn't need every detail to be understood. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was shared, an understanding forged from pain and resilience. The attack begins. 2:47 a.m. The alarm on Marcus's laptop beeped sharply. An alert from one of the motion sensors. "They're here," Marcus said, his voice cold and ready. The camera feed flickered to life, showing 3 shadows moving along the edge of the parking lot. They crept toward the building, slow and deliberate, sticking close to the walls like rats in the dark. Cena's muscles tensed like a coiled spring. "Positions," Marcus ordered. Cena moved to the door, standing just behind it. Alicia rolled to the far corner of the room, clutching the panic button that Marcus had wired directly to the police. They waited. The first sign came in the form of a faint scratch at the lock, a sound like fingernails against glass. They were trying to pick the door. Cena's pulse slowed, his breathing steady. Every ounce of training, every memory of fights in arenas and on the streets, it all led to this moment. Another scratch, then a soft click. The door creaked open an inch. Now, Cena moved like a force of nature. The door flew open, slamming into the figure on the other side with bone-cracking force. The man stumbled back, collapsing onto the ground with a choked grunt. "Get inside." Now, a voice growled from the shadows, a voice Cena recognized all too well. The leader was here. The battle in the dark. 3 bikers rushed forward, fury burning behind their eyes. Their leather jackets gleamed under the faint glow of the hallway light, their faces twisted with rage and desperation. The first man lunged at Cena with a crowbar, a fatal mistake. Cena ducked, grabbing the weapon mid-swing and ripping it from the man's hands. A quick jab to the stomach followed by a vicious elbow to the jaw sent the biker crumpling to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. "I told you this was over," Cena growled. The second biker swung a fist wrapped in brass knuckles. Cena stepped aside, catching the man's arm and twisting it until he heard a satisfying snap. The biker howled in pain, dropping to his knees. But the leader was different. He didn't rush. He didn't swing wildly. He waited, watching Cena with cold, calculating eyes. "You think you've won," the leader snarled. "This isn't about some woman in a chair. This is about respect. You took that from me." Cena took a step forward, his fists clenched. "Respect isn't earned through fear. You don't deserve it." The leader lunged, faster than expected. His knife glinted under the dim light. Cena sidestepped, but not fast enough. The blade grazed his side, a hot flash of pain blooming along his ribs. "You're done, Cena." But pain didn't slow him down. It fueled him. Cena grabbed the leader's wrist mid-swing, twisting it until the knife fell to the floor. With one swift motion, he slammed his fist into the man's face. Once, twice, 3 times, until the rage in his eyes turned to fear. "You're finished," Cena said through gritted teeth. "You don't get to hurt anyone ever again." The leader crumpled. Alicia's moment. In the chaos, one of the bikers had slipped past Cena and Marcus. Alicia saw him first, a shadow moving toward her from the hallway, his knife glinting like a promise of pain. For a split second, fear gripped her. She was trapped. Alone. No, not this time. Her fingers found the panic button and pressed hard. The alarm shrieked through the apartment like a siren of defiance. The biker lunged, but Alicia wasn't done. She grabbed the nearest object she could, a metal thermos, and threw it with every ounce of strength she had left. It hit him square in the temple. The biker stumbled back, dazed. "You think I'm weak," Alicia shouted. "You think I'm helpless. Try me." The door burst open seconds later, Marcus rushing in with terrifying precision. One quick move, and the biker was on the ground, restrained. The aftermath. The police arrived minutes later, sirens blazing and red and blue lights flashing like victory banners. The bikers were dragged out one by one, cuffed and bleeding, their reign of terror finally over. Alicia sat quietly by the window, staring out at the night sky as the adrenaline began to fade. Cena sat down beside her, clutching a towel against the wound on his side. "You okay?" Alicia nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I'm more than okay. You were incredible back there." A soft smile crossed her lips. "So were you. Guess we made a pretty good team, huh?" Cena chuckled, wincing slightly from the pain. "Yeah, we did." A new dawn. By the time the sun began to rise, the nightmare had ended. The bikers were gone, arrested, charged, and facing justice for their crimes. Alicia was no longer just a survivor. She was stronger, fiercer, a woman who had faced her fear and stood tall, not despite her wheelchair, but because of the courage that had always been inside her. And John Cena. He didn't just protect her. He found something in himself that had been buried for too long. A reminder that being strong wasn't about never getting hurt. It was about standing back up. Every single time. The healing battle. The city had quieted, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was the kind that followed after a storm, heavy and thick with the weight of what had passed. Inside Alicia's apartment, the dawn crept through the blinds in slanted rays, cutting through the lingering darkness. But the atmosphere in the room didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. The bikers were gone. Arrested. Finished. But the scars, they were just beginning to form. Wounds that run deeper. John Cena sat on Alicia's worn-out couch, clutching an ice pack to his side where the blade had cut him during the fight. The physical pain was manageable. It wasn't the first time he'd taken a hit, and it wouldn't be the last. But it was the silence that hurt more. He watched Alicia from the corner of his eye as she stared out the window. The red and blue reflections from the police lights were long gone, replaced by the soft glow of the morning sun. But the shadows in her eyes hadn't faded. She was gripping the armrests of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles had turned bone white. "It's over," Cena said quietly. Alicia didn't turn around. "Is it? I thought it was over the last time, too." They still came back. The frustration in her voice was raw, bitter. This wasn't just about fear. It was about being forced to live in survival mode, knowing that the world was quick to remind her of her vulnerability. "They're not coming back," Cena said firmly. "They're facing real time now. Assault, attempted murder, breaking and entering. The law's going to stick this time." Alicia finally turned to face him. "And what about the next time? What about the people who think they can do whatever they want just because they see someone who looks weak?" Her words weren't an attack. They were a cry for something deeper than reassurance, for justice that wasn't temporary. Cena didn't have an answer, not one that could make it all better. "You were never weak," Cena said instead, voice steady. "You were stronger than anyone in that room last night." Alicia let out a bitter laugh, but her expression softened just a little. "You're the first person who's ever said that," she whispered. "Memories that never fade." Later that afternoon, Alicia finally managed to sleep, her body giving in after hours of exhaustion, fear, and adrenaline-fueled chaos. But Cena couldn't rest. He found himself pacing the small living room, tension winding through his shoulders like barbed wire. His body still ached, but it was nothing compared to the heaviness sitting in his chest. Marcus sat by the window, his arms crossed. His sharp eyes scanned the parking lot below, but it was clear from his stiff posture that he too wasn't at ease. "You're still carrying it, aren't you?" Marcus asked suddenly. Cena paused. "Carrying what?" Marcus gave him a knowing look. "The guilt. I've seen that look before. You think this is about protecting her, but deep down, you're trying to protect someone else, someone you couldn't save." Cena swallowed hard, turning away from his old friend. "I thought, maybe if I could stop something bad from happening, it would fix the past." "You can't fix the past, man," Marcus said quietly. "But you did something good. You saved her. And you gave her something nobody else could. Proof that she's not alone in this fight." Cena didn't reply. His thoughts drifted back to that moment from years ago, when his best friend was beaten while he was miles away, training, thinking about future glory instead of being there for someone who needed him. The weight of regret was something he had learned to live with, but that didn't mean it had ever gotten lighter. Alicia's turning point. It was late in the evening when Alicia finally woke up. The weight in her chest was still there, but something felt different this time. The fear hadn't disappeared, but the helplessness had. She rolled into the living room, noticing Cena sitting near the window, staring at the skyline as the sun set in streaks of orange and purple. "You okay?" she asked softly. Cena blinked as if pulled from a trance. "I should be asking you that." "No," Alicia said, shaking her head. "I mean it. You okay? You saved my life. Twice. And I keep thinking, you didn't have to do any of this. But you did. Why? Cena was silent for a long time. Because I didn't want history to repeat itself, he finally admitted. I wasn't there when I should have been for someone else. I couldn't save him, but I could be here for you. Alicia watched him, her eyes softening with understanding. You did save me, she whispered. And maybe I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't broken, that I could fight back. I just didn't realize how much strength I had left until you showed me what it looked like to stand up. Cena turned to look at her fully for the first time since the fight. You didn't need me for that, he said. You already had it in you. A visit from the past. The following morning brought unexpected news. A knock at the door broke the relative peace that had settled over the apartment. Cena moved toward it instinctively, checking the peephole. It wasn't another threat. It was an officer from the local precinct, Detective Lorraine Fields. She was sharp-eyed, with years of experience etched into the lines around her eyes. Mr. Cena, Miss Parker? She nodded toward Alicia, who had rolled into the living room. I have some updates about your case. They're staying locked up, right? Alicia asked immediately. Detective Fields nodded. Yes, the evidence we gathered, combined with your video footage and Mr. Cena's testimony, makes this a slam-dunk case. They won't be seeing the outside for a long time. Relief washed over Alicia's face, but the detective didn't leave it at that. There's something else. We ran their connections through our database. Turns out this wasn't just some random gang. They are connected to a larger network operating in the city. Extortion, intimidation, smuggling. These guys are part of something much bigger than we initially thought. Cena's stomach tightened. So it's not over yet. Fields shook her head grimly. No. But thanks to you two, we have enough evidence to start dismantling their network from the inside. Alicia stared at the detective. You mean, we actually made a difference? More than you realize. The road to recovery. The following days were different. The constant fear that had clung to Alicia like a second skin began to peel away. The apartment felt less like a prison and more like home again. The shadows that had once haunted every corner were beginning to fade. She started doing things she hadn't done in months. Going outside, visiting her favorite coffee shop, even going back to her physical therapy appointments without the looming fear of someone following her. But recovery wasn't just physical. It was emotional, too. One night, as she sat with Cena on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the city lights, she spoke softly. You know what's funny? I always thought being strong meant not needing help. But maybe real strength is letting someone in when you're terrified too. Cena nodded slowly, staring out at the skyline. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, again and again, no matter how many times life tries to knock you down. Alicia turned to him, her expression soft. You're not just a fighter, John. You're someone who knows how to stand back up and help others do the same. Cena didn't reply. He didn't need to. They sat in silence, the weight of the past slowly lifting with every passing minute. The call that changed everything. Just when Cena thought the battle was over, his phone rang. The number was familiar. Detective Fields. We need to talk, she said, urgency thick in her voice. We've uncovered something. It's bigger than we thought. Cena's jaw tightened. What is it? We traced the gang's network back to a higher authority. Someone pulling strings behind the scenes. Someone who hasn't been touched yet. You think they'll come for Alicia again? There was a pause. They won't stop at intimidation this time. If they come back, they'll come back to finish the job. Cena's pulse quickened. The fight wasn't over. The final reckoning. The quiet moments before a storm are often the most deceptive. They trick you into believing the worst is over, lulling you into comfort with promises of peace and safety. But John Cena knew better. The fight wasn't over. In fact, the real battle had only just begun. The phone call from Detective Lorraine Fields still echoed in Cena's mind. The gang that had terrorized Alicia wasn't just a small group of thugs looking for trouble. They were connected to something bigger, a syndicate operating in the shadows, pulling strings behind the scenes, making people like Alicia suffer in silence while they thrived on fear and intimidation. And now, they were coming to finish what they started. But Cena wasn't going to let that happen. Not this time. The calm before the storm. Inside Alicia's apartment, every breath felt heavier, like the walls themselves were preparing for what was coming. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. "We knew it wasn't over," Alicia said quietly, her hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair tighter than necessary. Cena stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the street below like a soldier on watch. "No, but this is different. This isn't just about fear anymore. This is about power, and making sure they don't think they can take it back." Alicia rolled closer, her voice steady despite the anxiety that rippled beneath her words. "We beat them once. We'll do it again. This time, they're not sending pawns," Cena said, finally turning to meet her gaze. "They're sending the people who built this system of fear, the ones who make sure no one fights back." The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Alicia's jaw tightened. "Then we fight harder, gathering allies." By that evening, Cena had made the calls that needed to be made. Marcus Ramirez was the first to return. The retired Marine's voice was low but fierce. "You think I'm gonna let this slide? I'll be there in an hour." Next came Detective Fields, who agreed to send undercover officers to keep watch from nearby rooftops. "We're not letting this get swept under the rug, Cena. They want a fight. We'll give them one, with the law on our side." The last call Cena made was to an old friend from his wrestling days. Darren Wolf, a mountain of a man with a reputation for being as tough as nails outside the ring as he was inside. "You need backup?" Darren asked without hesitation. "Say no more. I'll be there." By midnight, the team had gathered in Alicia's apartment, each of them prepared for what could be their last stand. "This isn't about a few guys looking for revenge," Marcus said as they gathered around the living room table. "This is about dismantling the fear they've been feeding on for years. And we're going to hit them where it hurts most," Cena added. Alicia nodded, her voice sharp with determination. "We're not just surviving this time. We're ending it. Setting the trap." The plan was risky. They would let the gang come, draw them in, and gather irrefutable evidence of their crimes. With undercover cops in place, cameras recording from every angle, and the apartment fortified like a fortress, it wasn't just about defense. It was about making sure this was the last time anyone tried to hurt Alicia, or anyone else like her. "We've got eyes on the streets," Detective Fields confirmed through an earpiece. "They won't know what hit them." Cena stood by Alicia, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" She took a deep breath. "I was born ready." The attack begins. 2:38 a.m. The first sign of danger was subtle. Movement on the security feed. 3 black SUVs rolled up quietly, headlights off. Cena's eyes narrowed. "They're here." Men dressed in black tactical gear spilled out of the vehicles, moving like shadows across the parking lot. Unlike the bikers, these men were professionals, silent, disciplined, and efficient. "This isn't just muscle," Marcus muttered. "These are hired mercenaries." "Doesn't matter," Cena said, voice cold and steady. "They're not getting through." The mercenaries approached the building from all sides, cutting off any potential escape routes. "Positions now," Cena commanded. Marcus and Darren took defensive spots near the entry points. Detective Fields and her officers were stationed nearby, ready to move in when the time was right. Alicia stayed in the living room, the bait, but also the heart of the plan. Breaking point. The infiltration. 3:01 a.m. The front door lock clicked. The mercenaries had broken through. The first attacker slipped through the doorway like a shadow, but before he could react, Cena was already there. Boom. A powerful punch landed squarely in the mercenary's chest, sending him sprawling backward into 2 others. The door slammed shut again before the rest could enter. You picked the wrong fight, Cena growled. Suddenly, glass shattered from the balcony. Another point of entry breached. Darren rushed forward, grabbing one of the intruders mid-leap and throwing him across the room like a rag doll. "Welcome to the Fight Club," Darren muttered, cracking his knuckles. At the same time, Marcus faced off against two more attackers who had broken in through the hallway. His military instincts kicked in. Each movement was fast, efficient, and brutal. "You're not taking this woman. You're not taking anything," Marcus said, his voice like ice. Alicia's moment of power. While chaos erupted around her, Alicia sat in the center of the storm. Suddenly, her security system beeped, motion detected in the hallway. Another intruder had slipped through unnoticed. But not for long. Alicia spun her wheelchair around and grabbed the emergency panic button. This one wasn't just an alarm. It triggered an automatic door lock system and activated a high-pitched security siren. "I see you," Alicia said through gritted teeth. The mercenary froze, disoriented by the sound. Before he could recover, she hurled a heavy metal bookend straight at him, hitting him square in the jaw. "You think I'm weak?" Her voice was steel. "Think again." Cena's fight for justice. In the main room, Cena faced off against the leader of the mercenaries, a cold-eyed man with a scar running down his face. "You're making a mistake," the man said, pulling a knife from his belt. "The only mistake was thinking you could win," Cena replied. The fight was brutal. Every punch felt like colliding with stone. Every block sent pain rattling up Cena's arms. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. This wasn't just about the fight in front of him. It was about every person who had ever felt powerless, every person who had been silenced by fear. With one final burst of energy, Cena dodged a knife swipe and drove his fist into the man's jaw, sending him crashing into the ground. "It's over," Cena said, standing over him. The police stormed in. Sirens blared outside as Detective Fields and her team stormed the apartment. "Everyone on the ground," she shouted. The mercenaries didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, every attacker was cuffed and dragged out into the waiting squad cars. "You did it," Fields said to Cena, her expression fierce but proud. "You stopped them." Cena didn't respond right away. His eyes found Alicia, still in her chair, still breathing, still strong. "No," Cena said, his voice low. "She did." A new dawn. In the aftermath, the sun rose like a beacon of hope, washing the city in soft golden light. Alicia sat on the balcony, staring out at the horizon. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid. Cena joined her, sitting quietly beside her. "You're safe now," he said. "Not just safe," Alicia replied. "I'm free." There was silence between them, a comfortable, peaceful silence. "What happens now?" Cena asked. Alicia smiled softly. "I live my life, without fear. And what about you?" Cena took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past finally lift from his shoulders. "I keep standing. For the people who can't, and for the ones who find their strength because they realize they're not alone." Epilogue. Strength in the shadows. Weeks passed. The syndicate was dismantled piece by piece, and the city felt lighter somehow, like the air had cleared after a long, suffocating storm. Alicia returned to her daily life. But now, she did so with a fire inside her that hadn't been there before. She spoke out at community events, telling her story, inspiring others to stand tall, no matter their circumstances. And Cena. He moved forward, not as the indestructible fighter the world knew him as, but as a man who had finally made peace with his past. Sometimes, true strength isn't found in victory. It's found in standing by someone who needs it the most. In the end, it wasn't about fighting. It was about never giving up. Because courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing tall, even in the shadows.